I'm going to hand over to Andy now. So Andy, just over to you, and then whenever you're ready, I'll come back.
Righty ho, no problems. Good morning, everybody. Hope well. It is a fine Friday, and what better way to end your week than by having a look at digital learning, which is always exciting as we get into this here e-learning adventure. So I'm going to take you through just some hints, tips and ideas and different things that I've done over the last few years around making digital learning that little bit more than just that standard point and click adventure. Now, I know Salim's asked you to turn your microphones off, and that's fine, but being a frustrated trainer as I am, there's going to be a variety of questions as we work our way through this one. So feel free to flick them back on whenever we get into some of the interactive sessions so that you're not getting bored with me wittering on for the next hour or so at you. So without any further ado, let's have a look at this one in terms of what we're going to cover today. So we're just going to cover these elements that are on screen. So we're going to give you a whistle-stop tour, really, of the kind of things that we should be bearing in mind when we're looking at creating content that really engages learners with online learning. I've come from a variety of different organisations and worked with a variety of different businesses where online learning's always been that what's the word, competency-based, or it's been compliance-based, and it switches people off instantly. So it's thinking about how we can really get people interested in that kind of thing and how we can drive them to want to utilise online learning facilities. We'll have a look at how we can self-pace learners. One of the things and frustrations that I've certainly picked up from learners across the last few years is that people can sometimes feel that they're being rushed through something or that they have to complete it by a specified deadline. So today we're going to have a look at how we can give learners some more space to be able to explore some of that learning for themselves. We'll have a look at some of the basics around interactive elements that we should put in there. I'm very much of the belief that online learning shouldn't be any different to face-to-face, in the sense that one of the big wins from face-to-face learning is that you can interact with your group. You can, get them to participate in different activities, and why should online learning be any different? So we'll have a look at those. Perhaps something's a little bit of a passion project for me, but we'll have a look at evaluation and assessment. We'll have a look at what it is that we need to do in terms of analysing whether or not your online learning is working for you, which from a personal point of view can be so much more than just a test. So we'll have a look at that and play around in that kind of space. And then we'll think about how we can develop some future actions for learners as we move forward as well. So we're really going to try and take you through that end-to-end process today, from around content creation all the way through delivery and engaging with learners, right through to the end, where we're going to look at some of that evaluation and assessment and really make sure that this online learning is delivering, a decent return on your own investment for you. But before we get into that, I'd just like to ask some questions to anybody, everybody that's on the call this morning. Is just, first of all, talk to us a little bit around what's your experience of online learning. Has it been fun? Has it always been interesting? Has it always been beneficial for you? I'd just be really keen to hear from yourselves around what your own experiences with it have been like. So feel free to stick your mics on and let's have a conversation about that. What have people experienced with online learning before? Or not? That's also cool as well.
Hi, Andy.
Hello there.
Hi. In terms of my experience, I have to admit, I find it really challenging as a trainer delivering online learning. And it's always exhausting at the end of it. I always feel like, trying to keep learners motivated and engaged, and then the first, 15, 20 minutes of it is always spent trying to sort out so many different issues with people's mics and things like that. So, yeah, I have to admit, I find it a challenge, and I can't say I enjoy delivering it.
Lovely stuff. Well, let's see if we can change that over the next 40 minutes a little bit. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's that great fun, isn't there? At the start of some of these around sort of, your mic's not on. I think, a favourite phrase I'm hearing so often from learners now is you're on mute. There's so many things, like that keep flying through. So it's a really good shout. Thanks for sharing. Brilliant. Thank you. Does someone else just want to share their own experiences, kind of things that they've been through?
I kind of had to complete my master's remotely, And that was
Wow.
quite challenging as well. You know, it's quite hard making that connection with people, with your, you know, course mates when you don't get to see them in person. And yeah, another issue is that it was quite an hands-on course, and, you know, doing it online just made it so much more trickier. You can watch training videos on, you know, how to use certain things, but yeah, it's nothing beats face-to-face interaction, really.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's, you know, that's a real key point there, isn't it? Around, you know, the limitations as well, and being aware of what you can achieve online versus what you really need to do face to face. I love that around using videos. And there's only so much you can learn from video. I mean, I'll be honest, I've seen so many videos of great guitarists now. I should be playing Wembley. You know, I should be that amazing having watched those, and I'm not, because you're right, you do need to experience, and you do need to be in that space. So absolutely, let's have a look at some of those limitations of it today as well. Let's just take a couple more opinions, just a few more from others. You know, what about your own experiences, challenges, things you might have faced with it? Anybody else like to share? Everyone's being really polite. Let's see if we can check this up as we go through the session then. No problem at all. Let's move on to the next bit. So quite often when we talk about, hello? Quite often when we talk about online learning, we've got an expectation that it's going to be really exciting, it's going to be really high tech, this is going to be groundbreaking, I can't wait to participate in this session, it's going to be something completely different, I've never experienced it before. And then what pops up as a you know, multiple choice questionnaire at the end, and I read a boatload of text, and then I fill in some true or false answers, and yet again I've been suckered in, you know, into that reality of it's not all that exciting, it doesn't feel all that great, it's just more testing, it's just that kind of thing come through. And I think a lot of the things that we do as learning professionals quite often is we almost over-egg it, or we almost, you know, overhype in terms of what can be done with online learning, or we just expect people to really buy into it. Now myself, I'm a completely, you know, I'm a self-confessed geek. I really like anything technological, I really like nerdy stuff, I really like to play with technology, and it really works for me in terms of being in that space. But as a learning professional, I also need to recognise that people are very different. Not everybody wants to play in that space. And the more I big up, you know, the greatest thing ever around the newest software that's going to teach you X, Y, Z, that's not necessarily going to work for everybody. So we really need to think about how do we engage those different types of learners, and repeatedly doing the same thing over and over again, you know, and getting people to do just multiple choice assessments at the end and so on is just not going to work. So we do need to think about how we can vary that up and how we can do that. So one of the first things that we can do is really start before we even begin to roll out a learning intervention and ask ourselves the questions. Well, when we talk about engaging with a learner, what are some of the things that come to mind? So if we forget whether it's online, forget whether it's face-to-face, if we're talking about engaging with learners or getting people interested in learning about the subject in its own right, what might some of the things be that would come to mind? So just throw that one out to all of you out there. So just some of your own viewpoints. If we're talking about engaging you with learning, what might be some of the things you'd want us to explore and look at?
For me, Andy, I really think it's about making sure that that learner is in there at that moment, is taking away something, they're participating, they're able to read the content, absorb it, and then walk away from it thinking about it, and hopefully go on and discuss it with someone. That for me would be engaging.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, so they're going to hold it, it's going to stay with them. Yeah, that's a really great shout. You know, it's not just a question of I've done this event and now I can put a tick in a box to say I've done it. It's stayed with me, I've remembered it, it's mattered, and I can walk away with it. And as you say, share it with other people. Let other people see what it is that I experienced and I've learned, and I can now do something with it and really drive something for myself. So yeah, absolutely great shout. Thank you for that. What else do we think about? What else comes to mind?
Andy, there's a message in the chat panel from Des.
Oh, okay.
Who's online about digital marketing. But Des, I don't know whether you might want to expand a little bit more on what you mean by digital marketing.
You know what, I think I may have got the wrong end of the stick, because when I read it, it says when we talk about engaging learners, what comes to mind? Yeah, sorry, I probably got the wrong end of the stick style, but certainly, Andy, thinking about it, it is going to be where you do engage that person. It's got to be of interest. It has to be. I do insurance, and we've got to do like reflective. So you've got to then, once you've learned something, I always say if you can learn it as if you're going to teach it.
Yes.
So that's the key thing for me.
Yeah, really get that understanding behind it. You're absolutely right. If you're going to have to roll something back and teach something back, then you've absolutely got to have that grounding underneath, haven't you? You know, you really need that understanding. So it's about thinking about what's in it. You know, for me, what sits behind it? What am I going to have to do with this? How am I going to have to roll it out? So some really great suggestions and some really good thoughts there. So when we talk about engaging learners, just some of the things that we look at from a learning design point of view are these. So we think about different learning needs. So we'll think about, you know, how likely is somebody to want to get involved in an interactive session? So let's use today as an example. You'll have noticed by now that I seem to not be able to go more than 1 or 2 slides without asking a question, you know, and inviting that interaction back. But I recognise that not everybody's going to want to get involved in that, and that's absolutely fine. There's some of us that, you know, interacting, and that's great, and, you know, everybody else can listen and reflect upon the conversation, take that time to, you know, think about it and absorb that information that's coming in. So we do need to make sure that we've got all of those different learning needs catered for. If I sat here today and just delivered a presentation at you, those of you that are participating, it might switch you off a little bit, because you might want to be more engaged, you might want to be more interactive in the session. So we do need to think about those different learning styles and needs. Interactivity, whenever we're designing a face-to-face learning intervention, one of the things we'll look at is how much of the time is me spent at the front of the room talking to people. You know, and if the lion's share of that day is me spending, you know, my time just presenting it at people, the likelihood is I'm not going to achieve a good result. So I need to bring in a number of different types of exercises, different activities where people are working in, you know, working on their own, in pairings, in smaller groups, moving around the room, doing different things, getting them out to explore different areas so that they're more engaged and interacting, you know, with the content that we're going through. And online learning should be no different. It's really tough to expect learners to sit right in front of a screen and spend an entire day listening, you know, or spending hours on end listening to what it is that we're going through. So we do need to think about what that interactivity looks like and how we change, you know, those learner states. We'll also think about reflective sessions. You know, do people take the time to think about what's actually happening sort of, you know, to them in terms of their own mindset? Around are they taking the learning away? So as we were discussing just previously, you know, are people really holding things inside and taking it away? Are they sharing that learning with other people? Are they sharing that experience, you know, what that looks like? The point was made there then around teaching back, you know, and if I'm going to have to learn it so I can teach it, then I need to really be able to reflect and think about what it is that I've taken on board and how I'm going to, you know, present that information back to people. And as a learning professional, we really need to think about, well, how do I give people the opportunity to do that? The fourth one that you can see on there, you know, refers to self-discovery. When we were at school, it's absolutely fine to be force-fed information. There's no problem with that. After all, you haven't really got a choice. You sit in a classroom and somebody throws information at you and you're expected to sit there and absorb it. Something interesting happens though. Once you become an adult and you start to think about learning again, you've actually got a choice. I no longer have to listen. So I can decide whether or not this learning is of any interest to me or whether or not I want to do anything with it. So we really need to think about, if I'm going to engage with the learner, what is it that they can discover about themselves? What is it that's useful to themselves? How's that going to drive them forward? How's that going to increase, you know, their own personal experience and that kind of thing? So we really need to think about how we build those opportunities into sessions as well. And then the final point, no training course would really be complete without innovative games or abstract ideas. You know, so we think about, well, you know, the storytelling techniques that you might use. You might share something from your own personal life or your own personal experience to illustrate how learning will be brought to life. And what should stop us from doing that online, whether or not it's in a webinar format like we're doing today, or whether or not it's your traditional e-learning point and click kind of thing. You know, so there's nothing to stop us from utilizing all of those techniques. So those are the kind of things that we really need to hold in mind whenever we talk about engaging with a learner or thinking about taking a learner with us on their own journey. These are absolutely the kind of things that we've got to bear in mind. What we never think about when we're designing training is how many tests can I throw at them? Is there, boatloads of text in here for people to read, as illustrated by those first two images. And then the third image is just that linear, straightforward path. I think it's safe to say, if all of us look back at, how we've learned in the past, or, how we've grown and how we've shaped ourselves as individuals, we haven't just stayed on one straight road and followed something through just in one direction. We've taken a variety of different detours. We've gone and explored in different areas. We've taken that experience and shared it with something else. We've built on top of different things that we've learned. And the pathway is probably more all over the shop, or probably looks a little bit more like Spaghetti Junction, in fairness, in terms of the number of different times you've taken the wrong junction and come back on, or roundabouts and tried different things. There never is just one route through. But what I find is when it comes to online learning, what people are very good at is going, this is where somebody starts and here's the test at the end and this is the content you'll read in between. And it is just that one journey. So what I'm talking about today is about people being that bit more brave and being able to break away from that and ask people to do something different along the way, get them to walk away from screen and get them to reflect on things for themselves and do things differently. So what can you do to engage with these learners? Bearing all that stuff in mind, if we're going to do all of that kind of thing and we're going to have these reflective sessions and interaction, what do I need to do? Ultimately, you need to be able to answer these questions that are on screen right now. So first and foremost, what is it you want your learners to know? Really bottom that out, really be clear on what it actually is that you want people to know at the end of your session. Just as importantly, start to think about, why do you need them to know it? What's your driving factor? So if you're looking to get somebody to take some information on board, if you're looking to really help somebody sort of develop themselves, why? Why are you looking to do that? Why are you looking to get them to know this? The third point, what is it that you need them to do? So remember, whenever we're looking at adult learners, this is not just about theoretical knowledge. This is not just about giving people information. This is about facilitating a change. So we're looking for people to do something different at the end of the learning event. Doesn't matter how big, doesn't matter how small, we are looking for them to do something differently by the time they've completed that learning event. So think about, what is it that you need them to do? And then the bottom two are the two that often get missed, and particularly get missed when we talk about e-learning or we talk about online learning via webinars or sessions, such as this one today. And the first one is, why should they care? Now, earlier on, I referenced when we were at school, and we sat there and we were force-fed information, if you will, or spoon-fed information rather, and we just sit there and we absorb it. As an adult, I've absolutely got a choice as to whether or not I want to learn anything else. It's my complete choice. I have free will, and I can decide if it's of any interest to me. So some of our role as that learning professional, whenever we're building anything to do with online learning, is really distilling that, the answer to that question, which is, why should somebody care about it? And we do that by answering the bottom point on there, which is, how will they benefit? Yeah. So this is what you will get from it. This is why you should care, and this is what you'll get from it. This is what success will look like if you complete this intervention. This is how you can drive that forward. This is how you can develop yourself. This is how you can look to sort of grow that little bit further, and how you can gain more and more as a result of this. Does that make sense? I'll take that as a yes and move on to the next bit. So a question again for everybody on this one. Think back to yourself when you've had to complete a typical e-learning package. So this could have been something around health and safety, everyone's favourite subject, GDPR, whatever it might be. When you've had to go through programs like that, what do you notice about them? So just throw that one out to everybody out there. What is it you notice about programs like that? So think about those e-learning packages. What is it that you've experienced in those before? Anybody got anything to share?
Andy, there's a very interesting comment in the chat panel there.
Boring. I hope that's about the question and that's not about me, because I'll try and spin it on if I can. I really want. But yeah, it's dull, isn't it? It's uninteresting, because Typically, e-learning is used for those particular things. It's health and safety, fire safety, GDPR. You know, you can even cycle it up a little bit more. I was looking at one the other day for a business around anti-bribery and corruption. That was thoroughly exciting, you know, in terms of areas like that. So yeah, it's boring, it's dull, it's not really of any particular interest. And the kind of things that we pick out for them is this: it's got some real strict timelines. Whenever you get an e-learning package to complete, the first thing that happens is that you're given a timeline in which it's going to be completed in. This session will take you no longer than 20 minutes to complete. So I'm already under pressure. Yeah, I've been told it's not going to take any more than 20 minutes. Now, if it takes me 25, 30 minutes, does that mean I'm failing? Does that mean I'm struggling to understand? But there's pressure right from the get-go. The next thing that comes with them is always a deadline. Make sure you've done this training by such and such a date. If you don't do it by this date, you're in trouble. So actually, why should I bother learning? Because now it's become a big stick to beat me with. So already I'm not interested. Not only am I under pressure in terms of can I complete it in time, I've got to do it by a certain date as well. And then to cap it all off, there's a test at the end of it. Oh, this is terrible. This is just building on. So it's now going to test me on what I've just looked at. I hated tests when I was at school, and I really don't like them now. The next bit around no time for reflection, it tells me every time I've finished reading, click next, move on. It's constantly trying to shove me through the program. So I'm constantly, trying to run through this. I'm working too quickly through it. I haven't got time to sit back and reflect upon what it is that I've taken on board. The next thing is I'm spoon-fed information. Somebody's decided somewhere in an office when they're designing these programs, this is what you're going to learn and nothing more. So they've put all this information in a program and I have to go through it in that linear fashion. And so to the point Des has made there in the comments, yes, it's incredibly boring. It's dull because I can't be me. I can't, experiment with anything. I can't explore anything further other than what the package actually states that I can do. But these packages are really important and there are certain things that we can do. So some of the things that, I advise different people from, different organizations, businesses to think about when we're providing online learning is be a little bit more brave about it, be a little bit more challenging about it and think about these things. So first and foremost, allow the learners time to do something different. Yeah. So instead of just giving them a multiple choice question on screen, give them a bigger, wider ranging question that gives them time to sit back, think and reflect. Give them time to think about what it is that they've just experienced and what they've seen. Allow them to be adults. Allow them to experience adult learning and really take time for themselves to understand what it is that we've gone through. The second one, and this seems so counterintuitive to online learning, but ask people to walk away from the screen. Ask people to just stop reading now, go away, go use what we've talked about, go do something different, and make it come to life. Do something very, very different. Go do that instead. When you've done that, then come back and then carry on. If you think about it, in a training room, you do that a lot. So you'll do some presenting, then you'll give a group an activity, then they'll do some presenting, then maybe they'll do some research, then we'll come back to the wider group, and we're constantly moving and shifting that learner state. So instead, in this particular instance, ask your learners to completely walk away from the screen. Get them to do that. And then finally, think about tests. There's a time and place for tests. There absolutely is. And they can provide a real confidence boost for people in the sense that they can do some testing, they can check that they've understood things. And it's great from our point of view as a quick way of finding out whether people have grasped that early level of understanding. But when we talk about learning, in particular when we talk about adult learning, the things that we're looking for are for people to really drive a difference and make a change in the way in which they operate on a day-to-day basis. Now, you're not going to get a feel for that via a test. It's just not going to happen because a test is only, looking at assessing somebody's memory, or thinking about what it is that they've taken from that one session. So instead, think about some longer-term objectives. Ask people to forecast out a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months even, whatever it might be. And get them to build their own action plan that states, as a result of this learning, this is what I'm going to do differently. And then invite them to come back and provide that feedback to you around what they've done differently, how it's benefited them, how they've grown, and how they've shaped themselves as an individual. So really get brave when we start to think about that online learning, and remember these things. One, ask people to walk away, ask people to look at something different. And then secondly, really get them to focus on what that long-term change is going to be, because that's significantly more important than a test result in a one hit. The other thing to bear in mind is that, you know, face-to-face learning theory can still help you when you're developing online learning. Yes, there's different tools and different things that we can use to build online learning, but ultimately, whenever we're designing a session, it should come down to these four elements, which is tell me, show me, let me, and help me. So when we talk about tell me, be explicit. You know, explain what they need to know and the benefits available to them. So remember those 5 questions that we looked at just a few moments ago. Tell people this stuff up front. Get them to recognize that really early. The next stage is then show me. You know, provide instructions. You know, help people to generate inquisitiveness that motivates them to find out more. Get them to think about what it is that they can do. Yeah, so use the instruction that's within the program to help them find out even more about themselves. Next, around let me, give people an environment, you know, where they can make mistakes, where they can learn new things, where they can look at, you know, trying things out. So these would be your interactive elements in the program. Get them to think about different things. And then finally, the help me section. Be there to support whenever it's needed. So think about what you're going to do after the session to help people. You know, is there different resources you can get them to read? Is there some supporting guides that they can look at? What might that need to be? So think about what it is that you're going to do with people in those particular instances. So one of the challenges that I want to set for you today, so I'll just leave this on screen for a moment because I really want you to reflect and think on this one just for one moment, is just think about, one, what interactive elements have worked for you in the past? So think about those ones that you've attended where actually that was brilliant. I got so much from it. Sorry, that was my dog away in the background. Think about what's worked really well for you. Secondly, think about why it added value. And then thirdly, discuss the key learning that you took away. So think about what it was that you really took away from that. So what I'm going to do for a moment is I'm just going to pause my video. So I'm going to disappear just for 2 moments and mute myself out. And when I come back, I'm just going to ask some of you to share on that. I'm just going to give you a couple of moments to think about some of those things that have worked for you in the past. So just give you 2 minutes and then I'll come back.
So what we'd like to do here is change the direction of the workshop and hand it over to yourselves, because the workshop is all about a two-way street. You need to learn and you need to interact as well. So this is an example of how you can interact. So think back of some of the challenges you faced. You may have done it as a group e-learning workshop. It could be just a one-to-one you may have done. But think back and perhaps just throw some questions around these areas. So what sort of challenges did you face? What could have been done different? Anything like that. Let's have some discussion around it.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's open that one up.
I'll start off actually, Andy, because
Yeah.
there were 2 things that happened to me just this week. One was a workshop which I was invited to. When I was first invited to it, it was down as a 2.5-hour workshop, and
Right.
automatically I switched off, and I thought, how am I going to entertain myself for 2.5 hours in an online workshop? So
Yeah.
I think what you said earlier about the duration is absolutely critical. And even we haven't got it right when we do it, because we're learning from whether this duration is correct or whether it's too short, too long. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
But the other thing that is the expectation. So when you're a delegate on a workshop, sometimes the people who are delivering it expect you to have a certain level of skill and understanding, because they bring in other, like a poll or doing post-it notes online. They bring in other things that you as a participant have to interact with, and you're expected to have that ability to understand how to do that. So that becomes a bit challenging sometimes.
Yeah, Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, I think it was, sorry, apologies, I can't remember who made the point, but earlier on we were saying, you know, a lot of the time at the start of a session can be held, you know, with resolving issues and tech issues, people's mics, videos, and, you know, myriad of things like that. So these are some of the things that we can think about up front. You know, so when I was talking about the show me and the tell me sections, here's some guidance on this is what you need to do, break it down into real step-by-step actions, and recognize that, you know, this is new for some people. Not everybody does this kind of thing regularly. So it's really important to make sure that we provide that support wherever we possibly can. So yeah, absolutely, good shout on that one. Any other views or points on this?
There's something just been posted
Yeah,
in the
see
chat.
that one there.
So Nazneen has mentioned that having the learners contribute their knowledge during sessions is a good way to empower them. Even if they're shy at first, they will eventually feel more comfortable to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. Really recognize, you know, what everybody can bring into that session, you know, and constantly invite people to share. I think, you know, some people will be more open to it to begin with. Absolutely. Other people will take some time to come round, but it's about recognizing that, you know, if we were if we were all together in a room today, for example, one of the things you'd be expecting me to do would be to ask questions of you. You'd be expecting me to work with you almost on a one-to-one at certain points in the session. Just because we're online, that's what we're trying to do here. It doesn't make it any different. We can still absolutely interact in that way. So it's about making sure that we do all of that stuff as well. So yeah, really good shout, definitely.
I'd also like to add to that with it's why this is a really interesting point is because when you're doing e-learning, you normally don't get to see the people. Like today, we've asked them to switch off the videos and switch off the mics. So you don't actually see people. And so you don't see the body language and normally the non-verbal body language messages you get in a face-to-face are the things that as a presenter you tend to feed off, whereas you don't always get this. So the confidence level, both from the presenter's perspective as well as the individuals, is absolutely vital in this, in a two-way relationship. There's another question that's just been posted, which is how can you build rapport within the group? And this is absolutely important, this question. I mean, all questions are important, but Andy, I'll hand over to you because I know you want to talk on this as well.
Yeah, no worries. I think the big thing for me in terms of, you know, how do you build rapport, I think is always about if you were face to face with people. So if you were talking to people, you'd be asking people to share, and it's about being open, and it's about recognizing that this isn't your show. People are here to learn, you know, people are here for you to help them and support them. And what I always try to do within the online sessions, and hopefully you've been able to see through, you know, the short time we've been working through some of these slides today, is constantly asking people for their thoughts, their opinions, you know, recognizing that, you know, I asked the question earlier on about, you know, who's really had fun all the way through your learning. Now, pretty much certain that the answer was, you know, going to be boring, which was what we got. But if somebody challenges that and says, actually, Andy, I think that's great, and I think e-learning is wonderful, and it all sits in the right space, and there's no issues with it, you can use that to really help build rapport with the group by buying, you know, by asking people to expand on it some more. You know, you teach me, let's share that information, you know, let's be really open. So building rapport within the group has got to be about that open and honest interaction with one another. I think if you're using an e-learning program where it's static and somebody's, you know, learning at distance and they're learning at their own pace and you're not there to interact with them, think about, you know, including some contact information in there. So how people can get in touch with you outside the session, how people can, you know, feed back to you, and what that needs to look like as well. And I think as soon as we open up those lines of communication, you'll find people wanting to talk to you that bit more and wanting to come back more and more. So it's about that open communication, be it, you know, via email, virtually, or something like that, or through continuous asking of questions with the group and talking to them and discussing. So they'd be the key points. Another one that's come through there around questions being key. Absolutely. You know, constant questioning, and both, you know, sort of from yourself to your learners, and also allowing your learners to ask questions back. You know, let's recognize that, you know, the amount of time and effort you put into building an online webinar, you can think, I've got all of the answers that I need. I've got this right. This is going to be the perfect way. This is going to be the way this is going to go. And I guarantee you'll get asked a question immediately you weren't expecting. But it's about being open to that, you know, and allowing yourself to be as open as possible and allow people to ask those questions. So yeah, absolutely, questions are vital and key to this process.
Andy, can I also ask another question here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is about how do you fill the gaps? How do you fill the silences when you're presenting? So you've asked the question, the group's very quiet, they either for one reason or other haven't responded. How do you fill those gaps so there's not a long stretch of silence?
I think there's two ways. I think the first thing is, it's any presenter will tell you, the first thing you've got to do is embrace the silence. Because you need to give people time to think, so you've just thrown a question at them, you're not necessarily going to get that answer thrown back at you instantaneously. So we do need to think, we do need to spend some time to think about what that might be. The next thing is then think about, if there's still no answers and it's starting to feel a little bit awkward, then rephrase the question. Give people some thoughts and suggestions and inputs yourself, and give people, the opportunity to recognize that you can get this wrong as well. You don't have to have the right answer. I'm interested in hearing the wrong stuff too. So just make sure that sits within there as well. So I think that's a really good way of doing that. But it's about embracing that silence, because people will need that space to think. Next one then.
I mean, just a quick one. With that, when you start your webinar, can you just lay it out in front of people so that people know, the expectations? So, you are going to say to them, look, guys, I'm learning as well, and you guys might have something that I don't even know. So what I'm going to ask for us all to feel comfortable to state your point and to ask questions, because there's no right or wrong. I'm just thinking, if you do that up front and let everyone know that, yeah, look, no one's going to say anything silly. Everyone's question is important, and for you to get the best out of this, it's two-way.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, whenever I run, a full training session, so if ever I'm stood in front of a room full of people, there's always, that agreement slide that you'll use, or the agreements paper. One of the key things that I put up on there is, number one, recognize it's okay to make mistakes in the training room. Mistakes are what generate learning. If we got it all right all of the time, there is nothing to learn. Yeah, so nothing grows, nobody grows, because mistakes are where we learn. So, recognize that it's fine to get things wrong in there. The next one I always say is about being brave and bold. Try something new. The worst thing that's going to happen if somebody gives me a wrong answer, and the same thing today, so there's a couple more slides for us to go through in a moment. And if I ask questions of you guys and you gave me an answer that isn't what I'm quite expecting, the absolute worst thing that will happen is that I'm going to thank you for your contribution and work that into the session and say, yes, it's a great point, and this is how you could use that. If it's completely wrong, then what we'll also do is guide you to a different solution. So you're never going to be in a place where it's going to be the worst thing that you could have done. So yeah, absolutely, those house rules, a great way of doing that. Couple of other questions that have just popped up. Leading by example and having your camera on. I do, personally. I do always have my camera on, because I always think if I'm talking to somebody, be it online, face-to-face, they should be able to see me. You might have noticed I talk a lot with my hands. I'm quite expressive in that way. And just because I'm presenting in front of a screen, that shouldn't change the way in which I present. So it helps me to have that camera on. So absolutely, I do that. Another brilliant question there as well around latecomers. How do you deal with them? Face to face, you'd help them to catch up, but how should you do it online? I think there's a couple of things. Is one, to recognise, how late are they? So if they've missed maybe, the majority of the session, then I'd rebook them. I think if it's somebody that's arrived a few minutes late and there's just a couple of pieces of information they need, we've already spoken about building interactivity, and so set the group off working on something, as a task, as a challenge. And then I'd call the person. So, mute yourself out of the meeting and get them to answer the phone and bring them up to speed with where they're at. So there's nothing to stop us from doing what we would do on a face-to-face basis. It's just thinking around it a little bit more. And whilst I can't take somebody to one side as I can in a training room, I can put them on a different call. We can have a phone call or something like that. So that would be absolutely some of the things that I'd think about in that part there as well.
And also, I'd just like to add in there, Andy, as well, about the recording, because for one reason or other, people can't always join at the right time. But it's important that the start and end time always remains as it is. It's all about time management and how people can deal with time management. But when you're recording the session also, people who are late in the show, they can always catch up through that recording.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Andy, just got a quick one for you then. Obviously, more and more people are working from home, and what about the distractions? Because now you've got your delivery guys, you've got your, you got your dog there, which I can hear.
I am so sorry. I am so sorry about the dog. He's been walked for about 3 hours prior to this to stop that from happening. So I am
but that's part and parcel of life now. That's how we're getting to know. And I think it's about embracing that as well, and letting people realise that. Look, but I'm just, how would you actually deal with it if you've got a session going?
I think it's one of those where ordinary. So things like, let's use the dog barking because I can't escape that one. That happened. That happened today. But I think it's about being authentic and being natural with yourself. Let's recognise we are working from home now. There are going to be those distractions. So I think the worst thing that we can try and do is, just try to cover it up.
That's right.
Pretend it's just not happened, or pretend that sort of, there's not somebody banging on my door or something's gone on. So, when I'm, training in the room, when I'm on site with somebody or working, with people face to face, there are occasions where people will knock on the door. Can I borrow you for 5 minutes? I need to talk to you about. So I'll apologise to my group and I'll go and I'll have that discussion with somebody somewhere else. And that's the kind of thing that you do. So we're used to that kind of interruption in the office. I think what's different is that what we're not used to in the office is being, interrupted by the mundane, such as a dog barking or Amazon delivering something else that we didn't necessarily need, or whatever it might be. But it is just about being authentic. It's just, this has happened. I apologise for it if it's an interruption to the group, and then just moving on, just as we would do in the classroom. But I think some of those house rules that we spoke about, and some of the expectations, if it's a session where, somebody's going to miss part of it because they need to go and do something for half an hour because they're working at home, then let's ask them to book onto another session or ask them to rebook, just as you would do if they were attending the training room. But interruptions are going to happen. And I think that, the whole work from home thing it's about people being comfortable with the fact that it's a different interruption. It's not somebody from IT just coming to fix my laptop anymore. This is something else. So it's just about being comfortable with that.
Yeah, there's a great question there, Andy, about numbers. What are the maximum numbers in the class to ensure that optimum learning is for the group has been agreed?
So I would always say, in terms of face-to-face learning, I try to keep numbers between 12 and 16 from a face-to-face point of view, because I think that's a group size people can be comfortable with in terms of answering questions or, interacting with the trainers. So I often find that that's useful. Online, the temptation is to say, I could deliver to 300-400 people at once. You're never going to get anyone to speak out in a group that size. So I would apply the same, 12 to 16, try and keep those numbers there. If you're wanting to build that interactivity in, think about what's going to be awkward for people to talk in front of, in front of a wider face-to-face group. It'll be just the same online, perhaps a little bit more nerve-wracking because I'm not used to talking to a camera or doing things in that way as well. So I would say usually between those is where I would keep them at that point.
I'd also like to add in there, Andy, that also what we found is it depends on your audience. One, the audience, and secondly, the message you want to deliver to that audience. So if the message you're trying to deliver is one directional, all you want them to do is be able to listen and understand, then it doesn't really matter too much about the size of the group. Whereas if it's a more intimate group where you need interaction, you need more learning to be developed and more of a personal journey, then you need to be more conscious about the size of your numbers and the group, because as the interaction happens, you'll start finding that the time limits or the time duration of the session will start varying, and the goalposts need to change a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's about being clear, isn't it? Is what's your webinar for? Is it a presentation or is it an interactive session, and what is it you want to get from it? So presentations, you can ramp the numbers right up and that's fine. I've done presentations to businesses wide, but yeah, absolutely. If it's interactive, think about those numbers here. Good shout. Okay, so just a couple more slides for me to finish off on. We talked about evaluation and assessment. Everybody will have seen, I like to call it the happy sheet at the end of training. The delegates fill in that says on a score of 0 to 10, how much of a good time did you have today? Was the room too stuffy? Did you like lunch? That kind of thing. So I think from an evaluation point of view, or even a testing point of view, if you're testing somebody's knowledge, what does a number actually show? It doesn't really give you a great deal of insight into how successful that learning event's been. So what I would always do is think about things a little bit differently, and think about these different stages that are up on screen at the moment. So the first thing, find out if the session works. So yes, solicit that feedback. Ask people to critique what went on in the day. What worked well for them, what did they take away, what was useful, what wasn't, all that kind of stuff. The second stage is test somebody's learning, not their memory. I've already referenced action learning, so getting people to think of an objective that they can work on outside of the learning event rather than just a test. It's really powerful in terms of assessing, how successful somebody can be at that particular point. At the third stage, think about the support you might need to give, help them, encourage them, listen to what people have got to say about what they've done differently after the session. And then finally, the fourth stage, think about that accountability. Accountability for results must absolutely be shown. Learners need to be able to demonstrate what it is that they've done differently. Let's be honest, there's time investment has gone into how somebody's learned something, or into the event that somebody's attended. So they really do need to be able to show that they've done something with it. So at a period of around 3 to 6 months after the learning event, let's really check to see if they're doing something with it. If they're not, what I would suggest is that we need to either look at the learning event itself, or then think about what that help me section or that support section looks like post-training, to make sure all of that's included within there. So there's a wider variety of things that we can do outside of the standard testing. So things that I'd always ask you to consider are here on screen. So number one, what will your learners actually be doing after the session? So ask them outright, be that, be that whether it's a webinar like we're in today, ask people what they'll be doing differently, and record that so we can see whether they do it or not. But then also think about how you're going to follow it up. So we're going to get people to come back to us and let us know how successful it was. If it's an e-learning package, get people to state it on there. Think about them recording it, or think about them taking it away to talk to somebody else about, this is what I'm going to do now I've seen this stuff. But always think about that follow-up. Adults absolutely have a choice after learning, in that they can choose to do nothing. They can go through the greatest learning event known to man and choose to do nothing with it. They can leave the room and never look at it ever again. So think about what that follow-up is going to look like, and how you're going to check in with people to make sure that learning really is taking place. So with that in mind, we get to the very last slide, which is this bit, which is where I'm going to challenge you to do the same. Because obviously, this has been an online webinar. So what would be interesting to me is to think about, what are you going to do a little bit differently after today to adapt digital learning? What kind of things might you take away? And something I ask to anybody that I ever work with is what might you do this afternoon? What might you do today that's different that you've not done before? Because it's always interesting to see if there's something that somebody might consider doing that they've never done before. So similar as we did on the last slide, I'll throw this open to all of you. Just be really keen to hear your input around what is it that you might take away from today, and what might you do differently. So if anybody would like to share something, be it either verbally, or if you want to type it into the chat, that would be great as well.
So don't be shy, people. This is an opportunity. You've got the expert of Andy, who will be able to help field any of these challenges that you may be facing. Delivering online is a huge subject now. With the pandemic, it's where people are being used to delivering face-to-face services, in particular smaller businesses. You will have seen the challenges you face and how to engage with learners online. And so these sessions are designed to try and support you on here. So this session today was all about learning how to keep your learners engaged online, how you can adapt the content, how you can adapt the style, etc. So what will you be taking away from here? So there's something in the chat that's come through.
There's a few there, isn't there now? So change how the presentations are delivered and have questions before moving on instead of at the end. Yeah, brilliant, a great one. There's loads, isn't there, with presentations where people get told to hold questions to the end, and then actually no one's got anything to say because sometimes they've forgotten what it is that they wanted to comment on. So yeah, absolutely, let's get those out there. I like that one as well. I'm going to be brave and stop feeling I have to be responsible for learners to be engaged and enthralled all the time. Yeah, you know, people as adult learners will decide, you know, if it's going to be a great session for them. The more we can do upfront around telling people how they will benefit, or, you know, what they will get from the session, the greater the chance of success of that, you know, and the greater the chance you've got of people being really engaged and interested throughout. So that's a really good one. Discussion throughout as well there from Amir. So yeah, absolutely. You know, keep that discussion rolling all the way through. You know, the more you can discuss with others, it relieves some of the pressure off you as well. You know, if you're going to present, you know, totally to people, that's really quite a high pressure scenario to find yourself in, because you're constantly having to think about what's coming next. Open the discussion out to the group and give yourself a chance to think. So yeah, absolutely. Another one from Smile. Yeah, I believe it's been super as well. So thank you very much. Happy with that. I'll take that one.
It's always very, very challenging, and it's quite daunting sometimes. So if you're not experienced at delivering online, or if it's something you're looking at going down the route of, or it may be that you've tried it and you're looking at expanding on that, then I think this workshop has been very, very informative in that sense as well. There's another question, comment that's just come in, specifically for you, Andy.
Yeah, so hesitant low language and digital skill learners. Yeah, I mean, that can be one of the biggest barriers of all, can't it, really? So, you know, with things moving digitally in terms of, you know, how do we actually access, you know, the things, and encouraging people to do it. I still think, you know, the answer to a lot of that sits within that upfront conversation around this: why should I? You know, what's in it for me? What will you get from it? How will you benefit? I think wherever I've been in a place where people have been, you know, hesitant to learn something or hesitant to try something, it's because of a fear, usually a fear of failure or a fear of the unknown or something like that. So the way in which we can help people is, one, give people permission to fail. The greatest breakthrough I ever had was I was working with somebody who'd never actually been online before. They were terrified of using online equipment, and so hesitant at pushing any buttons or doing anything, until I explained that, you know, there isn't a self-destruct button. You can't blow it up. You can't break it. You can't do anything. If you push the wrong button, it just won't do anything. So we got rid of the element of fear. And then in terms of the, you know, the fear of the unknown, it was talking to them about, well, this is what you can gain. This is what it will open up for you. So I think the more we can do that, and the more we can help people see what they will gain and where they'll be able to grow and, you know, gain some real sort of benefit from, the more chance we've got of getting people to embrace that way as a way of learning.
Andy, there's a question coming in about learning style. Sounds like it's a very academic type of question being asked there.
I like that. So diverse mix of content to 8 different learning styles. Yeah, I mean, an easy way to think about it, if we talk about your traditional e-learning package, so I'm going to use everybody's favourite subject of GDPR, not the most thrilling. What normally happens on a GDPR session is you'll sit and you'll read about GDPR for a good half hour, and then be asked questions, and that's usually what happens. Instead, you know, instead of, you know, just getting people to read, think about some of that stuff in there for people to read, because we've got people that are theorists, and we've got people that do like to take that information on board. So give people things like that to read. We've got people that like to interact a little bit more. So think about some news reports, for example, that you could drop in there, some links to some videos on YouTube, that kind of thing. There's organisations that have made the news, sadly, through falling foul of GDPR legislation. So perhaps some of those news reports could go in there and people can watch it. So that's something a little bit more interactive, or a little bit more interesting than just reading more and more text. So it can include some video content in there. You could then ask somebody to, you know, walk away from the GDPR session and go and research your policy, find your data protection officer within the workplace, find out how it's, you know, impacts you and your business. And then when you've got that, then come back and carry on. So straight away, we've engaged with 3 or 4 different styles of learners on a really dry subject. But we've asked people, we've given people permission to watch a video, read something, and walk away from this screen as well. You know, so we've given people that opportunity to do different things and think about things in a different way. So I think that's probably one of the ways in which you can, is just think about, what am I putting within here? Obviously, today we've only been talking for about, you know, 55 minutes, something like that, which is probably about max in terms of just presenting. If we were spending a day together on this kind of subject, what I'd be doing about now is getting you all to go away and research something online for me, do some self-learning. We'll come back in an hour and I'll listen to your presentations. and then we'll probably watch some video this afternoon about different things. So there's a variety of different types of content, be it, you know, somebody's clicking through, read through, research, or video content. Just think about how, you know, different ways in which you can get that message across, and you'll absolutely cater for those learning styles as you go through that.
I'm just conscious about the timing now. We literally are coming to the end of here, so we may have an opportunity for maybe one or two more quick questions. So if anyone's got anything burning that they want to ask, now's your chance. Please either speak up or just put it into the chat. Whilst you're thinking about that, I just want to mention that following on also from that very last question, we've got a very exciting workshop lined up, which I've just put into the chat. And this is next week, and it's all about online tools to help transform your user experience. So this is an absolute brilliant workshop that will follow on from today's brilliant workshop, because now we're going to start looking at the various tools that you can use to deliver, to engage, all the different things that are available for collaboration tools. Some of them are free, some of them are paid for, some you have to put a subscription on. So there's a variety of things there that can actually help you and develop your engagement with your learners. And it's all about how the learner can experience their journey as well. So unless there's any final questions, there's one just coming in. Has your teaching style changed from delivering face-to-face to online?
That's a really good question. I think the thing I found hardest is sitting down, if I'm really honest. I used to find presenting sitting down nigh on impossible. I really used to enjoy standing up, walking around the room, and really engaging with learners. I think, if anything, it's made me more conscious of the content that I put in there, because I've always been of the opinion that even if the content's dry, if you can think about how you hold yourself in a presentation, you can bring it to life, you know, and you can engage with a group. So I think what has changed is probably there's a greater focus on the different types of content that go in the session. I think the way in which I present is probably the same. My hands have always waved around like that, sadly. So I present in exactly the same way, but I think that focus on content and that variation around, is it video, is it interactive element, is it theory, what does that need to be? That's certainly what's changed. Absolutely been in the last 18 months more than anything else, because there's that greater focus now on delivering sessions this way.
Great question. So unless there are any other questions, we are going to close this workshop for today. The purpose of these workshops, as we mentioned at the beginning, we've got a whole journey lined up from now until Christmas. We've already delivered this, about the third in a session, and it's all about trying to support smaller organizations, third sector organizations, even larger organizations who are facing the challenges of the pandemic, whereas we're from taking it, looking at the angle of how you were delivering prior to the pandemic, which was mainly face-to-face, and now moving online. And now that things are slowly opening up, it's having a blended approach. So doing some face-to-face and some online as well. So how do you encourage that blended approach? So these sessions are designed to encourage, to raise your aspirations, and we're here to support you. So if there are any questions wanting to work away from here, by all means, you do have our contact details, and do look out for our other workshops as well. We have got one on Monday, but that, unfortunately, for reasons beyond our control, we are going to have to rearrange the date for that one. So the people who have joined will get a notification. But our next one is the one that's within the chat panel. So if you do get time, please look at that one and do join on from there. But we'd like to wish you all a fantastic weekend. Have a great end to the week. Enjoy your day, and we'll catch up very shortly with everybody. Take care and all the best.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. Thank you.